Welcome back to the morning show here on Albright News. Joining us now is Ambassador Johnnie Carson, a diplomat and senior advisor at the U.S. States Institute of Peace. He served as the United States Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs and as United States Ambassador to Kenya, Zimbabwe, and Uganda. He's currently in Nigeria as a representative of the U.S. government as an international observer of the election. Good morning, Ambassador Carson.
Good morning. Good morning. Glad to be with you.
All right. We'll actually start it off from the basics. What are your expectations ahead of the 2019 general elections, which begins tomorrow?
I hope those elections will be peaceful, transparent, and creditable, and I hope they will help advance further Nigeria's maturing democracy. Nigeria clearly is one of the three most important countries in Africa today because of the size of its population, the growth of its and importance of its economy, and its growing tradition of democracy as the continent's largest democracy. We hope these elections will be extremely successful for all of the people of this country. Let me make, though, one quick correction with respect to your opening announcement. I am a former diplomat, but I am here in Nigeria as a part of a non-government delegation representing the National Democratic Institute and the International Republican Institute. Two organizations that were set up in the 1980s to support and encourage democracy around the world. These institutes are affiliated with other international institutions in other democracies around the world, which show strength and encouragement to those who are promoting democracy and free elections. So while I am a former diplomat, I am here with the National Democratic Institute and the International Republican Institute.
Thank you, Ambassador Carson, for that correction. Let me ask you, what is the interest of the U.S. in this particular election? Because just some days ago, we saw the former President Bill Clinton pull out from his attendance to witness the signing of the second peace accord. He says it would be viewed as being politicized. In some quarters, the relation of the U.S. in this particular election has been viewed as interference, undue one. So would you tell us what you think the interest of the U.S. would be in a Nigerian election?
As I said before, Nigeria is one of the three most important countries in Africa today. It is important because it is the most populous country in Africa. It has the largest economy of any country in Africa. It is Africa's largest producer of petroleum and exports of petroleum products. It is a regional center for the financial, banking, and telecommunications throughout West Africa. Nigeria is important for the 190 million people who live here. It is important for the West African region. It is important for Africa, and it is increasingly important as a key player in the global community. It is also the continent's largest democracy, and since this country's return to democracy in 1999, it has continued to mature, it has continued to grow, and we would like to see that democracy continue to move forward. We believe, living in the United States, that our best partners and best friends and best allies around the world are countries that share our values and our principles, our democratic values and our democratic principles, who believe in free market economic systems that protect the rights of their citizens, have free press, and allow freedom of religion. These are all the things that Nigeria stands for. These are the things that the United States stands for. These are the things that all great democracies stand for, whether they're in Africa, whether it is Botswana or Mauritius, whether it is in Asia, Japan, or Australia, or whether it's across Western Europe. But our desire to be here is to support those in this country who are committed to peaceful, creditable, and fair elections. And elections are an essential part of the democratic process where people are allowed to periodically and regularly vote for the leaders of their country. We're here because this is an important country. It's an important election. It will give Nigerians an opportunity to reaffirm their commitment to democratic principles and values. It will give Nigerians an opportunity to again select those leaders that they want to be their guides and stewards for a given period of time. And we believe that these are the key elements of democratic principles and values, ones that we live by and help to make the United States as great as it is today. So we're here because this country is a partner democratic country, and we believe that democracy is absolutely essential for well-being and progress of the nation.
Okay, Ambassador. You are quite experienced in African affairs in your service as a diplomat. Is there any trend you have noticed in elections in Africa that should worry any concerned member of the international community and indeed those who are participating in elections in this country?
Well, let me say that we're all always trying to make our democracies better, not only in the United States and Western Europe, but it's also true in Africa as well. Clearly, over the last 2 decades, we have seen a strong movement towards democratic, multi-party constitutional rule across Africa. And we have seen elections not only in this country, but we have seen successful elections in your neighboring countries of Benin, of Cote d'Ivoire, of Ghana, of Senegal. We've seen them in Tanzania. We've seen them in Kenya. We've seen them in Botswana. And there has been a substantial amount of democratic progress. But we always have to be on guard against backsliding. And that does occur. We do see democratic regression. There are still around the continent a number of leaders and countries who do not take the democratic values and principles seriously, leaders who have been in power for not just 4 or 8 years, but for decades. We do not think that this is wise, and we also see some places where leaders are turning back what would be progressive democratic norms, turning back things like term limits, which have helped to move the democratic needle forward across the continent. But yes, we have seen democratic progress. It continues to move forward. I think that the work of the Afrobarometer, which is published both in Ghana and South Africa, shows that some 72% of all Africans across the continent, when asked whether they prefer democratic multi-party governments with constitutions and elections, say yes, 72%. of the population say yes. I think there's a strong commitment for democratic principles and values in Africa. We're here in this country to support the democracy that continues to unfold, mature, and evolve in a positive fashion in Nigeria.
Now, Ambassador, you were the Assistant Secretary of State under the Obama administration and therefore the top diplomat for Africa. During your tenure, the main opposition contender for the presidency, Atiku Abubakar, contesting under the People's Democratic Party, was denied or was not given a U.S. visa at that time. He has more recently been able to travel to the United States. But can you give us a background as to why that visa was withheld at that time?
Let me just say I'm not familiar enough with that case or the history of the case to give you any kind of insights. All I can say is that the candidate that you've mentioned, Mr. Atiku Abubakar, was in the United States approximately 3 weeks ago, which indicates that he has the ability to obtain a U.S. visa and to travel freely in the United States. I was not able to see or meet with him when he was in the United States, but I was told that he had successful meetings in and around Washington.
I would like to just throw something in right now. What role are you here to actually play in this election?
As I said before, we are here to observe the election process, not to interfere with the election process. We are here to give support and encouragement to peaceful, transparent, and creditable elections. We are here to observe the election process, look at the political and electoral environment to determine whether it is one that will support the democratic process. We are here to help to validate the democratic outcome as it unfolds. But let me be clear about one point that is critical. We are not here to interfere. We do not take sides. We are not partisan. We do not favor any one political party. We do not favor any one political candidate. It is for Nigerians to select and choose their leaders and the parties that they are affiliated with. The second thing I would say is that the most important election observers in any country, are the citizens of that country. The non-governmental organizations, the churches, the media, the business community, the religious affiliated groups and organizations who also observe these elections. Election observation in the United States and in most democracies is open. Whenever we have elections in the United States, diplomatic missions in Washington from all the countries that are represented there can stream into the United States and watch and observe our election process. News media from all over the world can come in and observe that process. And non-governmental organizations from other nations can come in and observe that process. So election observation is not novel or unique to any democracy. It is our openness that allows that to happen, but it is international observation which supports a transparent and peaceful election. The third thing I want to point out is that although NDI and IRI are American organizations, Our team of 40 short-term election observation members come from some 10 different countries. It is a mission comprised of more women than men, and half of our group are Africans. Our delegation here is led by the former and very distinguished and celebrated president of Botswana, President Festus Mogae. The other co-leader of our delegation is the former president of Latvia, Vadia Virke Freiberger. The third leading member of our delegation is the former vice president of the Gambia, the Honorable Fatuma Tambajong. I am a senior member of that delegation. We also have the president of the National Democratic Institute here as well, Ambassador Derek Mitchell, and we have the vice chairman of the board of the International Republican Institute, Randy Schuman. But our delegation is comprised of very distinguished individuals from Africa, from the United States, and as I pointed out, a number of countries in Western Europe. This delegation is comprised of individuals who are themselves committed to democracy and who come from countries that are strongly committed to democracy as well. And so it's an American organization in the lead, but our delegation is multinational, and it is comprised of those individuals who are representative of the democracies from which they come. And then finally, I'll reiterate again, the most important observation is the observation of individuals who are here. We will, as observers, as we have done, meet with senior officials in the government. We will meet, as we have, with senior officials in INEC to assess their preparation for these elections. We will meet with the particular political parties, major parties, and their leaders to get their assessment and concerns about the election. And we will meet with security officials to see how they are preparing for the elections. But most importantly, as we have done in the short time that we have been here, we will meet with and talk with and learn from your own observers, from civil society groups like YAIGA and others, like the Center for Democracy and Development, the CDD, and others to find out how they view this process. We are here in a supportive role, in a encouraging role, in a role of support for democracy. We're not here to interfere. We're not here to select. We're not here to be biased in favor of one party, one individual over another. We are here to support democratic values and democratic principles because we believe that democracy is the best form of government which provides the greatest opportunity for nations and individual nations to succeed, and for individuals in those nations to succeed.
Indeed, Ambassador, but while the U.S. is interested in fostering democracy in Africa and in Nigeria in particular, as you have mentioned, for shared democratic principles such as free speech, rule of law, as well as Nigeria's population and economy, what seems to be missing is the U.S.-Africa policy. Can you tell us what the Trump Africa policy is, and does it exist?
I'm not going to speak specifically about the policies of the U.S. government currently. I think that that's a question you should place towards the U.S. ambassador and the U.S. embassy here in this country. And I must say that we have a strong ambassador and a strong diplomatic team in this country. I spent some considerable period of time working on behalf of the Obama administration's policy on Africa. And I am extremely proud of the legacy that we have left in that regard. Under President Obama, there was a strong and clear commitment towards Africa, as reflected in a large number of programs that he initiated and that continue to go on even under the current Trump administration. And I also might add that there are programs that were started under previous Republican administrations that were carried on by the Obama administration that continue to move forward. The United States is committed broadly towards Africa, and sometimes that broad support for Africa is more directed, intense, and focused under some administrations than in others. I will say that under the Obama administration, there was in fact a strong commitment to democracy. You in this region know that President Obama's first trip to Africa in his first 6 months of being in office was to Ghana to celebrate that country's democracy and to celebrate democracy in Africa. He subsequently established the Power Africa program to help increase power and energy and light generation across the continent. He established the Feed the Future program to help promote a green agricultural revolution and future for Africa, to help substantially improve agricultural production from the household level through the agro-processing level. He strengthened and brought into focus a global health program that built upon the PEPFAR program, the President's Special Initiative to prevent HIV and AIDS, which had been started initially by President Bush. And he promoted something which is extremely popular across Africa today, and that is the Young African Leaders Initiative, YALI, which brings young African professionals to the United States for executive management training to help sharpen their leadership skills and to strengthen their knowledge of governance and rule of law issues in order to make them better senior executives and managers in their various fields. Many of these programs carry on even under the Trump administration, despite that administration's lack of enthusiasm to the level that we have seen from previous administrations.
Yeah, Ambassador Carson, Nigeria, biggest economy in Africa, largest population in Africa, thriving democracy, while Obama was in office, yet he did not visit Nigeria. Can you shed some light on that, why he did not visit Nigeria?
Well, I will say very clearly that during my tenure as Assistant Secretary of State and during the last 4 years that he was in office, I strongly encouraged a visit by President Obama to Nigeria. And I have written publicly about this in several articles that I have published since leaving government. But while in government, I strongly encouraged a presidential visit here, and I continue to privately and publicly advocate such a visit at the State Department. and at the National Security Council even after I left government. I will be very frank, and I have said so in my writings, that the failure to visit Nigeria is the equivalent of an American president going to Europe and not stopping either in Great Britain, London, or in Germany's Berlin. This is one of the three most important countries in Africa. It is a country that the United States should not ignore, and it's a country that the international community cannot ignore. Yes, a visit would have been extremely important. Having said that, I was very proud to have come here as Assistant Secretary of State at least 7 times during a 4-year stretch. And on 2 of those visits, I, in fact, was in the company of then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Our first visit here to Nigeria was in August of 2009, and Secretary Clinton was extremely pleased to have had an opportunity at that time to meet with the late President Yar'Adua, a man who helped strengthen this country's democracy by establishing an election commission that made some very sound recommendations, and also being responsible for what turned out to be the appointment of Professor Jega, the former INEC chair.
Ambassador?
We were also here. We also were here later with Secretary Clinton to meet with then President Goodluck Jonathan. So we've tried at the next highest level, the Secretary of State, to be here to show the importance that we attach to this country.
Thank you, Ambassador. We tend to agree with your assessment of the importance of Nigeria. Now, your observatory duties begin well before the polls. You also assess the tone and contents of the campaigns. Can you share with us your impressions thus far?
Let me say that you're absolutely right. Although we have this short-term mission out here, NDI and IRI have had 3 pre-election assessment missions to this country. The last one occurred in December when my successor, Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield, led a short-term mission out here, which was very successful. They met with President Buhari. They met with the INEC chairman, Professor Yakubu. They met with a number of NGOs. And we also had short-term missions here as well in June and September. During those pre-election assessment missions, we sought to look at the environment, and a number of recommendations were made. They were published. And among those things that were said is that we encouraged the INEC to step up its communication with the parties and with the public about the election procedures. We encouraged greater voter education, better communication about the overall electoral process, the responsibilities and obligations that belong both with government. We also expressed our concerns about security and the need to ensure that the polls take place in a peaceful environment. that the security forces were clearly aware of their roles, and especially the role of non-interference in the process, and so we also encouraged that INEC make sure that there were adequate facilities made for those who had disabilities, those who might be blind, or those who might have some kind of physical disability, to ensure that they had access to the polls. But our commentary on this has been published, shared with INEC, shared with the parties, and shared with the public. And all of the recommendations that we have made are recommendations that deal with process, helping to ensure that there will be a transparent, creditable, and peaceful election. Again, not interference, but about process. And these are the things that are also being echoed by local observation groups. And again, local observation is the most important. International observation helps to add to the credibility and transparency and acceptance of the process.
Well, Ambassador, talking about safety and security, just yesterday, President Buhari gave a nationwide broadcast reassuring the international community and observers in particular. Was that reassuring enough for you?
Well, let me just say, I think that it was important, as it always is, for the president to reach out to the nation to say that he is committed to free, fair, and creditable elections. But quite honestly, since I've been here this week, the most significant thing that I have seen, one that gives me great encouragement and hope, was the signing of the peace accord. The signing of the peace accord not only by President Buhari, but by the main candidates to the race, including former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. The Nigerian Peace Committee, under the leadership of former President and General Abdullahi Abubakar, has done a remarkable, yes, ma'am, and he has done a remarkable job in working with his colleagues on the Peace Committee to advance peaceful, transparent elections. And the signing and the reaffirmation by the key leaders and the key parties to a peaceful, transparent, and credible election was very important. And I say that is probably the thing this week that has been most significant. And I hope that the message carried by both leaders was and is accepted. One of the two speakers echoed the words of your former president, good luck, Jonathan, words that every politician around the world who is a Democrat, small d Democrat, should follow. And I think it was said that my personal ambitions should not be the cause of the loss of one drop of Nigerian blood. And I think that is what needs to prevail. Democratic elections are no doubt competition between two sides. There will be a winner and there will be a loser. But the people who come together to compete for the the leadership of their political parties, their states, and their country are not enemies. They are not enemies. They are political competitors. And if they lose, they have, under the democratic process, again, a process, the ability to come back. This is not conflict. This is not war. This is political competition in a multi-party democratic system in which Constitution and rule of law prevail. It is not the basis on which there should be any violence. There should be no violence in the democratic process. And the signing and the reaffirmation of those who signed that peace accord is the most important thing that has happened this week.
I want to say thank you for obliging us this morning.